Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gland Bodybuilding Motion. Today I'm going to talk to you about something I've covered before, but I'm going to talk about it again because I was just scrolling through Instagram and I believe it was Lee Labrada that popped up or whatever, and he was giving beginner tips of what people should do in order to gain muscle. And he was saying hypertrophy exists within the 8 to 12 rep range, and you just apply that rep range as a blanket statement to all of your exercises, and that will be giving you the best of both worlds, strength and hypertrophy. And in some ways, I agree with this. It is a good rep range, 8 to 12 reps, but I want to really speak about something that it seems like a lot of people do not speak about. And I really want to emphasize this because it's extremely important. Now, there are certain exercises that you will perform, and 8 to 12 reps will be a good, conservative, moderate weight for you. And usually this will be a compound lift like the bench press, whether it's dumbbell or barbell or shoulder press or leg press or squat or so forth. But there are going to be movements that if you do 8 to 12 repetitions to failure, the intensity that you're using is going to be a risk for injury. One such exercise would be the preacher curl. If you come down with an 8 to 12 rep intensity where you're hitting failure at 8 reps, there's a good chance that you might tweak your bicep or cause a problem. The other exercise would be skull crushers. Some guys have really great elbows and they can come down really aggressively and do an 8 to 12 set for skull crushers with a barbell. But other people, they'll be wearing elbow sleeves for the rest of their life because they're doing that. It'll just cause a bursitis or an ache in the elbow. So you're seeing a pattern here where isolation movements, it's good to err on the side of caution and use higher rep ranges. Leg extension is also another example of this. I found leg extensions, especially if I used any rep range under 20 to 25 reps, I noticed that it irritated the crap out of my knees. And a lot of other people will also notice the same thing, especially if they're using a rep range in 8 to 12 reps where they're hitting failure. So say they're using, a few hundred pounds or whatever, and they're just blasting out 8 reps and then they can't do another rep. The intensity and the pressure on the knee joint during that exercise is such that it could definitely lead to patella irritation, and therefore that will transfer over to your compound movements and mess your compound movements up. An example of this is back in the day, I knew a guy that was doing some preacher curls. And he was saying that every time he did lat pull downs or any back work, his elbows were irritating him. But he assumed that because it didn't hurt quite as much during preacher curls, that the preacher curls weren't the problem. But the minute he stopped doing the preacher curls, and of course extending at the bottom like he was, then the pain went away. And it can be the same thing in this case when it comes down to your knees, your back, and so forth. Another example of this is I used to do bent over rows when I was around 18 years old. I used to round my back and do bent over rows the Arnold Schwarzenegger way. And what would happen is 2 or 3 days later, I would go to squat, and when I'd squat, my lower back was slightly irritated. So I falsely assumed it was the squat that was irritating my back. But once I learned proper lower back form, I realized that by over rounding or extending my lower back when I was doing the bent over row, it was actually irritating my lower back and then preventing me from being able to do a good leg workout with squats. So in this tradition, if you are doing your isolation movements too heavy, let's not even talk about range of motion or form, but if you're doing them too heavy, you might irritate your joints so much that when you go to do the compound movements, your real bread and butter for hypertrophy and strength, your joints might be too irritated in order for you to properly stimulate the muscle and get good results. So this is something that you really need to pay attention to. And again, it is going to be different for each person because a few of these movements as well, you might be saying, hey, that movement never bothers me. I never have any trouble, say, with leg extensions, or you might never have any trouble with skull crushers or whatever. But when you're doing an isolation, pay attention to how your joints feel the next day and err on the side of caution by using slightly higher rep ranges than you would with the compounds. And I think that's a good general rule, at least to start with. And then from there, you can do your own experiments and find out what is appropriate for you. Mountain. So just so you know, I'm about 51,000 words into my book about what it was like to grow up as an aspiring bodybuilding / karate guy. And yeah, lots of stories from my youth. Again, it's not an instructional book on working out or anything, but what it was like to lift weights in the 80s as a kid in my garage gym. And yeah, some of you guys might like that. So I will be selling that as an ebook on my website. And if there's a lot of demand, maybe I'll make an audio book or do a physical copy where I autograph copies and stuff and send them in the mail or something like that. But that's a lot more work. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. And thanks to the paid supporters, and take care for now.